Hello, hello. Oh, that's loud. Thanks all for coming today. You are at session 4, grown by Southwest Farmers for Southwest Farmers, trials and pipeline for regionally adapted certified organic cover crop seed. And I know you all have seen this many times already, but we're going to just go over community agreements one more time. We all have a role in tending the space. During this conference, we agree to speak for ourselves and make space for others, be as present as possible, be aware of who is missing in each conversation. Remember that no one has a monopoly on truth and everyone's experience is valid. Critique ideas, not people. Listen to our bodies and tend to their needs. Give some grace for technical and logistical difficulties, and aim for connection, not perfection. And yeah, thanks to everyone for coming today, and I'll pass the mic over to Sam.
Good morning, everyone. So we're going to quickly have everyone introduce themselves, how your name, what you're affiliated with, and how you came to be part of this group, and anything else you might want to add.
You want to start, Kristin?
Tim, you're first.
Okay, here he goes. First speed start, I guess. Hi, can you hear me okay? Good morning, my name's Tim Voss. I'm the kind of the point man for this project, the extension educator, I guess, the farm coach. I farmed for a long time in California, growing certified organic vegetables before I came to New Mexico and started doing this kind of work. And so it's the Southwest Grain Collaborative, and now we're working on cover crops. We're going to tell you about that.
Hi, I'm Rich Pratt. I'm a professor at New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, which is a little bit north of El Paso, Texas. I had a former career at Ohio State University in maize breeding that evolved into organic breeding just about the time I left for New Mexico State. And I also realized we were kind of behind the 8 ball in cover crops research, and became more interested in helping our growers with organic transition and their questions about cover crops, and trying to address some of the reluctance about adopting cover crops. So I'll pass it to Kristin.
Hi, everybody. Whoa, that was really loud. Good morning. Thanks for coming. My name is Kristin Swoszowski-Tran. I live in Ladue, New Mexico, which is 7,500 feet elevation in the mountains. And so people think often of kind of a desert environment, but we are high desert. We have ponderosa pines. And so I am at the furthest northernmost point in some of our trials. So I run a farm called Ladue Grange, which is a diversified operation. I have a background in breeding Lilium, where I had built a tissue lab where I did ploidy manipulation and interdivisional hybrid work. And so I come from it as a farmer, but also as somebody who's really interested in looking at phenotypes and looking at the expressions and how that might work for our varying Southwest climate.
And me. I'm Samantha Hilborne-Naluai. I am part of this group mostly as a technical assistance provider. I was at Rodale Institute for the past 3 years. I was brought on to this group about a year and a half in to, help with organic transition, help farmers, help, the research stations get organic. Get certified organic. but now I work for the New Mexico Acequia Association. And this is my first year growing out, some of our traditional varieties. So there's Acoma Blue up there. Yeah, and I'm also the facilitator sometimes for this group in real life, so. And Dan Hobbs was listed on there. Well, he can't be here, but he will have a, video presentation at the very end. So he's also a key collaborator in this. And he's in Cortez, Colorado, which is near Durango.
Okay, so I'm assigned the task of just setting the stage for how we got to this phase of this project. We're entering our 9th growing season, and the second year of a 4-year NIFA organic transitions grant that's focused on trialing drought-tolerant, warm season cover crops and trying to develop bioregionally adapted cover crop seed to eventually, this is an aspirational thing still, eventually be scaled up for commercial production to be grown by farmers in our region, for farmers in our region, and possibly beyond if we get that far. Just briefly, the project started off with an economic opportunity to scale up land-raised corn in the region. We heard about that was being done by a company called Hacienda based out of LA. They were working with farmers in Old Mexico, in Oaxaca, and elsewhere. And we heard about that and we said, why couldn't that be happening over here in New Mexico? Same type of varieties of corn grown for thousands of years by native farmers and others, right? And we did some focus groups and found that there was interest in that, and started doing outreach and started getting people interested in actually doing this to make a little more cash flow into their rural communities, which are hard strapped for cash flow. And of course, corn and other grains are non-perishable. It can be grown long distances from markets and then moved around. As we came in with our first corn crops, our quality was really good. Our customers, our local customers, as well as Hacienda in LA, really liked the quality and said to us, what else can you grow? What else are you thinking of growing? And that was in sync with us trying to figure out what a good rotation would be to keep having sustained yields of corn over the seasons, not just a one-shot thing, right? So there was interest in wheat, barley, rye in particular, and local beans. So we started trialing different types of small grains and beans, and we really started doing well with a couple of things right away. White Sonoran wheat, which is adapted to that region, and then it's become one of our best-selling crops. And then also Tibetan purple barley is another one that we're selling quite a bit of, and Danko rye is another, and then common bean. Mainly, there's a kind called bolita that is known to be indigenous to New Mexico. I think that's the right way to say it. Really a delicious common bean. So those were the elements of a crop rotation that were all sellable crops, which is really important to the farmers that we were getting to know. And yet we knew that we needed to add cover crops into that. And as Rich mentioned, sometimes the farmers were less familiar with cover cropping. A lot of the farmers that we started working with had been just doing alfalfa for years only, just a monoculture with alfalfa all over the Southwest. And we'll talk about that a little bit later too. But so we started introducing cover crops. All the seed that we were providing was provided at no cost to the farmers, which was a big service that we kind of just spontaneously started doing. And we were sourcing local seed and doing seed increases on the food crops. But the cover crops, we had to go far away to get those. We had to order those from Nebraska or further east. We had to order them from California. So we were getting cover crop seed, buying it, which was expensive, just the seed, and then getting it shipped to New Mexico, which is almost often as much cost as the seed itself. And we were doing that, and we were working on a small budget. So as we figured out small grains, and now we're talking, 6 years into the project, it occurred to us, hey, maybe we should really be thinking about, if we can harvest small grains, we could also harvest cover crop seed. Maybe we should try to start growing cover crop seed here in New Mexico and cut those costs for the organic farming community. We were thinking of it being organic certified cover crop seed, and that's partly because at the time that we started getting this idea, the Organic Seed Association came out with their 2022 report on organic seed, right? And it confirmed our notion that the demand for organic seed and cover crop seed in particular was increasing, but the supply was not increasing. So there's a real need for this. So in keeping with our philosophy, we wanted to, if we can do this and turn these cover crops into marketable seed, that's another cash crop for the farmers we work with. So we're always looking to keep the cash flow and the business side of it going, and we'll talk more about the business part of it later if we get to that. But so that's about it.
Would you like me to pick it up? Okay, so the photos you see behind you are a little bit of the bird's eye view of our situation in the Southwest. Think of ourselves essentially as ground zero for climate change. If you've lived in the Southwest the last few years, you've experienced record high temperatures, recurring drought. This is a very serious situation. So a farmer's ability to irrigate is very important. Are they drawing well water? Do they have surface water rights? I think we have a picture of is Elephant Butte Dam up there. Yeah. So this is, the damming of the rivers. Yes, it helps mitigate flood damage that occurred historically, but it also makes us reliant on how much of that water can be released, and it gets into all of the state's downstream issues and all the politics. So, in short, our water situation is tenable. That makes agriculture writ large tenable. And as we think about organic production, it's value-added production. It's more sustainable production. Building soil health is also building soil physical properties and improving water infiltration, reducing surface runoff during our heavy monsoon rains when we get them, increasing soil moisture holding capacity. So we feel that our ability to maintain sustainable agriculture will really be fostered by adoption of organic production techniques. So toward this end, the specific end of having non-thirsty cover crops in the summer, the question becomes, but how much water do we have to give them instead of having a fallow period? Is a fallow period such a great idea with soil moisture loss and wind erosion and dust storms that literally close the freeway? Is keeping the soil bare really a good idea? It's not. So putting a cover crop there, and okay, but how much do I have to irrigate? Well, if we remember traditional agriculture in the Southwest, that goes back thousands of years, that was done without wells. That was done without Elephant Butte Dam. That was in the monsoon season when we do have some rain. So if we have a limited water resource, but we do have a water resource, can we augment the monsoon season? So that's really the premise of the research, is to do limited irrigation, or what's called deficit irrigation. So timing with the monsoons. Which crops? Which are the non-thirsty crops? Which crops are available? Sorghum Sudan grass. Yes, organic certified seed is available. Cowpea. Yes, certified seed is available. Foxtail millet. Harder to find. Pearl millet. Harder to find. Teferi bean. Well, we have Teferi bean. Thankfully, we've done some seed increases, and we have some available to share. A new type of cowpea was released by Texas A&M for wildlife browse. Smaller seeded. Rampant vining. Oh, that sounds like a candidate for cover cropping. So we had 4 grasses and 4 legumes to evaluate in an organic production system or transition system. And there's a slide of alfalfa up there, and you're going, what's that for? It's not just for Charlie Brummer. Yes, alfalfa and the pecan trees in the background are our leading economic crops in New Mexico. And yes, they're water intensive. So what is the future horizon for those crops? Can we think about possibly replacing alfalfa with other legumes that have high nutritional value, but a lower water requirement? So that's where the Teferi beans come in, the cowpeas come in, and we have forage analysis for those crops. They are very high quality forage crops. What we don't really know is how much nitrogen they're adding to the soil. We make that assumption. It's a reasonable assumption. And yes, Sam has helped dig up the roots and check, yep, there are nodules there on the Teferi beans and on the cowpeas. So, we're good. Have we quantified that service to the cropping system? No, but it's a bit of an assumption. So we have a PhD student, Aminu Saibu, who is working in doing replicated trials of these species and looking at the service they provide to the cropping system in terms of weed suppression. So the upshot, sorghum Sudan grass is a beast. It makes biomass and it suppresses weeds. Maybe a little bit of allelochemistry going on there too. Foxtail millet, not so much. Pearl millet, yes and no. There seemed to be a bit of a seasonal effect there. Legumes, don't look to the legumes for good weed suppression. I didn't mention sun hemp. Sun hemp a bit, but again, getting into a little bit of environmental effects. Is it season? Is it elevation? Kristin mentioned 7,500 feet elevation. That's very different than down in the valley in Las Cruces at 3,600 feet elevation. And the other thing I think we've really learned through grower cooperation, who also select which of those cover crop candidates they'd like to grow, is that the needs of their farm, of their operations, their timing, their equipment is just as important as seasonal and locational effects. Locational effects are, excuse the academic word, confounded with farm effects, right? So this is what we're learning, and I'm very thankful that we're learning with our grower collaborators. It's really invaluable.
So say Rich and the NMSU group has been doing they just finished off 2 years of research. So they have 2 growing locations, and that's what a lot of that research has come from. At the same time as these, replicated trials are going on farm, we also had grower collaborators like Kristin. So we have both going on at the same time, but the one thing is that the grower collaborators, they pick and choose, like, oh, I want cowpea. I don't want, pearl millet. I want this one. So I'd like Kristin to talk about, what has worked on your farm and, like, what has tanked, what has not done well for you.
So that's what I've really loved about this collaboration is, as a farmer, I also have livestock. I have yak and I have horses. And so I like to I want to be efficient, and sometimes I like to see something that can be the trifecta, right? It might have qualities for human consumption. It might have qualities for livestock consumption. It might be suitable as a cover crop. And so some of the different things that Rich mentioned, may not work for me because I have ruminants, and so also the horses. So, for example, sorghum Sudan grass, while it creates an incredible amount of biomass, it also creates cyanide. It can be poisonous to those animals, and so that's not really a suitable fodder material on my particular farm. Same thing, something like a tall fescue, has epiphytes, and epiphytes are wonderful. They're fungus that helps, it's a symbiotic relationship with that particular grass. However, that then can turn into a pathogenic issue with, again, bovines. It causes vasovascular constriction, which kind of means that it can cause their ears, tails, and hooves to rot, right? So that's not a plant that I really want on my farm. I'm really interested in things like teff. So working with these guys, they gave me seed, at no cost, and I was able to grow out trial of teff. And it's something that's really fascinating because it's a drought-tolerant love grass from originally Ethiopia. And this particular plant is what the seeds are used to make injera, so they're used to make a bread. They can make a great hay before it enters into the seed forming stage. And so it's very palatable to livestock. It's very thinly bladed and not sharp. And so, like, my yaks really like to eat that. It also creates an incredible amount of biomass. But one of the issues with teff is that it lodges. And so where I live at 7,500 feet elevation, we can get 3 feet of snow, or we have a very short growing season also from June to perhaps September. And so I may have hail the size of golf balls come down. I can have, with climate change, we can have wind that's 65 miles an hour come blow through, and it causes everything to fall over, which is this lodging behavior. So in working with the Southwest Grain Collaborative, I've been able to do trials of specific kinds of grains, pulses, really looking at what will work for me and my particular farm with my particular climatic issues. I have a pH of about 7.8, 7.9, so alkalinity is a big issue. But again, if you want to sustain local food systems, you need to ask the folks that are there, what do you want to eat? What do you need for your livestock? What do you think will grow in that particular region? And so the idea of trying to create an organic seed bank of these specific attributes for that locality is really important. And so for me, I continue to try different things. So, for example, sun hemp, did beautifully in Las Cruces, but it got this high and just never flowered at my farm. Our German foxtail millet is fantastic. It creates a huge amount of biomass, but I've got to hustle really fast before all the finches get it, and I have to harvest, right before my snows come in. So I find that this has been a great opportunity to experiment, and I continue these experiments trying to figure out what we can do to keep the water usage at an absolute minimum, but at the same time creating, a high forage or high human consumption yield quality. But for the cover crop aspect, it's been invaluable to have this kind of biomass added to our farm. So we are a no-till farm. We use all kinds of biochar, wool pellets, different kinds of ways to create that sponge and to create the ability to capture water, which is really essential. And so different than here. I'm driving around these fields going, oh my gosh, there's water everywhere. That's like a dream for me. We don't have that situation. So this just continual ability to localize and adapt and collect seeds and collect the germplasm that works in that particular environment, I think is so crucial.
Taking time. I'd also like to talk about these multi-purpose crops. So cover crops are, every farmer has, their priority, like what a cover crop does. But we're also looking at like these multi-purpose. They, they're a green manure, but they could also be for your livestock. That's a lot of northern New Mexico and New Mexico in general. A lot of livestock are being raised. So we're gonna, Richard Pratt has called them tweeners. So if you guys want to talk about, some of those multi-purpose and things like that.
Yeah, what is it? I mean, there are many crops. Many of these crops can be used for multiple purposes, as Kristin said. One that I really like personally is foxtail millet. And it's not like pearl millet or Sudan. It doesn't generate a huge amount of biomass, but to me that can be an advantage in a few ways. It's got thin stems. Actually, so you can cut it for hay easily, and it's very palatable for your livestock. It's supposed to have very high nutrient values. So as a forage crop, it can be really good, and Rich is going to have some numbers on that. But also, from the point of view of field management, farm management, sometimes it's really good to have a lighter cover crop in your succession. If you're keeping a tight planting rotation schedule, instead of having tons of biomass that you're mowing, perhaps disking, or even if you're doing no-till, if you've got a lot of biomass, you got to let that break down to a certain degree before you come with your next crop. With foxtail millet, what I've observed and what I've imagined is that that might be good right before a vegetable crop that you really need to get in right now to keep your schedule, either for your marketing needs or because of seasonal changes ahead of you. Sometimes these things have to be done, as you all know, they have to be done really efficiently. So something like foxtail millet, I think, is kind of underrated, and people don't give it as much credibility as they might, and it has some real advantages. So that's one example.
I just wanted to share with you some forage quality data that's just came in. But before I do that, I want to thank the conference organizers, and I want to give a shout out to Cafe Ma'am for their wonderful contribution, delicious coffee. And I do want to acknowledge the NEFA Organic Transitions great panel managers. I hope they're doing well. They're so good to work with. So foxtail millet, using it as a cover crop for forage purposes. So the data shows roughly 5% protein values, 58% digestibility. So among the grasses, among the cereals that we've evaluated, yes, it's the best for nutritional quality. And yes, right, sorghum Sudan grass has a reputation as low quality, and yeah, sure enough, 2.5% average protein and 54% digestibility. So this is the wonderful thing of this type of cooperative effort is we can get these lab analyses, we can get these data, and we can share that information with you and put some specifics on it. And, you know, as I'm looking at these numbers, you know, my assumption is that tepary bean has excellent forage value like cowpea. I saw cowpea in West Africa used as hay. There's an old Ag Experiment Station bulletin from Tucumcari in New Mexico. They were growing cowpea for hay as a forage crop. Why did it disappear? You know, why did we stop growing barley? These are beautifully desert-adapted crops. Thank goodness that the Hana preserved tepary beans. There was a huge bottleneck when modern irrigation came in and we could start growing alfalfa and so on. It displaced some of these desert-adapted crops like tepary bean. So I guess the other thing I wanted to say about the tweeners, the multi-purpose crops, is that most of our cover crops right now have been drafted, right? They were cereal crops. They were grain legume crops. They weren't selected to be cover crops, right? And so I'm delighted to hear about positions opening up with USDA-ARS and public universities where people are going to be breeding, selecting cover crops to optimize their contribution in ecosystem services to the cropping system. And so along those lines, we have some dozens of germplasm accessions that are available, thankfully, through GRIN. And so we're looking at diverse sorghum and millet germplasm. Well, why would we do that? I mentioned that sorghum Sudan grass is available as organic certified. We're doing that because they're hybrids. And we would like to have open pollinated varieties so farmers can save their own seed. And so that it's not, there's no IP attached with it necessarily. And if they want to exchange that germplasm, if they want to do production contracts for seed companies, those are possibilities. And I think that was a beautiful segue for Dan. Does that make sense? Can we go ahead and run that video now? Looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Dan. Hope everything's going well there in Colorado.
So, just for some context, Dan is like our next. He's at the level that we want farmers to be. If you, maybe after you'll see this, you'll understand, but growing seed for, and, you know, combining it, selling it, all that good stuff. He's like our, you know, he's the one who knows how to do all this. A lot of the farmers that we're working with now don't know how to do this. They're learning along the way, and he's kind of our next step. Yeah. Yeah.
I might end it very sorry not to be with y'all today. Instead of going to get this amateur self-produced video, I'm going to speak a little bit about our work with Ecotypes and the grain seed. Our enterprise is called Pueblo Seed and Food Company. We, for many years, farmed on the Front Range of Colorado in the southeast area, Pueblo area. We moved the farm in 2021 because of concerns with cross-pollination with some of our maize. So we spent a lot of COVID looking for a new farm. Found a nice isolated spot in McElno Canyon, which is a few miles outside of Cortez. This is a very interesting agricultural district, home originally to the Puebloans and Central Puebloans. They vacated this area in approximately 1275 and moved down to the Rio Grande Basin during a period of severe drought. Also, the Ute Mountain Ute tribe is nearby, and the Dina. Anglo settlers came in the late 1800s and planted vast orchards and also dry beans. What we're doing here is working on about 25 acres, grow approximately 60 to 70 varieties a year. 10 or so acres is devoted to legumes and grains. Large for us, a couple acres of chili, diverse small-scale seed production, and garlic. We also have a bakehouse in downtown Cortez, where I'm standing now. Got a facility that's approximately 5,200 square feet. We clean, mill, store, and make products out of our grain here. And we're open for just 2 retail days a week, and then we do a lot of wholesale type manufacturing. So I'm going to dive into speaking about some of the crops that we've been really excited about. We've been on a quest to find drought-hardy grain and legume crops that kind of check boxes of food, seed, for cover crop, and also forage. In 2023, we took on some trials with crops from the Sahelian region of Africa. These were largely several species of millets, southern peas or cowpeas, sorghums, and then also some of the good old Southwest tough stuff like the Hopi corns, Tepary beans, and emirates. Not all of these worked. We ran into daylight sensitivity problems with some of those millet varieties in particular, but boy, did we learn a lot. There's a few that really floated to the surface for us. Finger millet we're very excited about. Also the grain sorghums and the southern peas. So I would say out of all the trials, these are kind of on the top of the list for us, largely for food crops, but also for cover crops. Now, we were really excited to meet Sam and Tim with Rich and Kristin and the other farmers in the Southwest Grain Collaborative Network that were doing parallel work. Now, in this region we're in New Mexico and southern Colorado, we roam from about 3,000 feet where Rich is located at New Mexico State University, up to about 8,000 feet in some regions in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains and the Southern Rockies. So an expansive area that encompasses a lot of interesting little growing niches. So collectively, we're just learning so much and trying lots of different things. I left out one important crop is the durums. We're pretty excited about the potential of durums here in the Southwest, and these are planted in the spring, but we've started to plant them in the fall. And so New-Beer durum, for example, is the one that we're really trying to train up for fall planting. And this is classically a great pasta wheat and pretty heat tolerant. And so we've been in 30-some years of drought, really difficult growing conditions in both years. And it's becoming increasingly important to identify crops that can survive on less water. So these grains and legumes are extremely important in the ecological farm mix for conserving water. We can put more of our water resources onto the chili, for example, and other horticultural crops, because most of these other things that I'm talking about will irrigate only 2 or 3 times and still have substantially good yields. So they are just becoming so important for our farm system. And there's also, a labor piece that's worth mentioning. It seems that it's become harder and harder to field crews to work on some of these real intensive specialty type crops. And so the grains and legumes are, of course, handled a little more mechanically and makes it easier for us that way. Going to switch into talking a little bit about ravaged it. There's proso, foxtail, finger millet. This is the dragon's claw variety that we sourced from Adaptive Seeds. Very excited about that. Planning to put in about an acre this year. Bird resistant, very nutritious, tough, drought hardy. That's a winner. The red amaranth, very important food crop for the ancestral Puebloans. Grain sorghum, buckwheat, urad beans was interesting to grow, but was pretty long season for us. Don't think it's going to make the cut. Cowpeas right up there on the top of the list. Kind of checks all those boxes. Food, cover crop, feed, amazing crop. Working with 3 varieties of that presently. Here we have the tepary beans, maybe some of the most drought hardy crops in the world. Shattering problems make that one a little challenging. Some of these southwestern maize varieties are just incredible. This eagle corn is a classic Hopi variety. This was produced with no irrigation and maybe one rain. The plant was about 12 inches tall. Just give you a sense of scale there. And it produced 2 pretty nice looking ears. Rye, of course, always been a survival food. That's a winner. Barleys, this year we're going to be going deeper into the work with barleys. And here's some of the ancients: Khorasan, spelt, emmer, einkorn. And then I'll just give a quick view of our bakehouse here. This is our retail area. We do a lot with food literacy so that people can learn about the different grains, various corn trials, and our seed and value-added products over here. Thanks a lot for the opportunity, and have a great rest of the conference.
Yeah.
That's coming in a couple minutes. The next group has 45 minutes as well. So they can connect with the outro, sorry. Thank you all so much, everyone, for that presentation. That was really wonderful. I'm sorry, we do have, we're right at time. We have another session here starting at right now, so we're going to have you all direct questions after the break here. Thank you. So that they'll all be around here in the break after this next session. So we're going to invite up our next group of speakers here. The Northeast Seed Network taking root.
You can nurse first, boys.
I think. Yeah.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am Dina Brewster. I'm a farmer from Connecticut, and going to talk to you today about the Northeast Seed Network, which is a group that has really started just in the last 4 years but has had a number of different arms as we think about regional seed. And it's been beautiful in many ways over the last couple of days to see the sort of interconnectedness of all of the seed work that's happening across the country. And in particular, we are going to talk about an emerging market and ask a few questions of this group, because we are still in our infancy and we are a grassroots coalition that is looking for more people to join in. Let me see if I can, we are talking about ecotypic seed, something that Sefra will illuminate in a few minutes, but I wanted to take a moment just to kind of tell a little bit about how I got involved in the work as a fruit and vegetable farmer and a shepherd. If you had told me I'd be standing in front of this group talking about native seed 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even known what that necessarily is. So it's been a very steep learning curve for me, but it was born out of what we see as sort of a set of mega disasters happening in our environment. One of which was a study that came out of Germany, replicated in the US, that documents a 72% decline in insect abundance in our nation. And if you are a fruit and vegetable grower, that should stop you in your tracks. And of course, in the Northeast, we have this highly fragmented landscape. We're all dealing with the crisis of climate change on our farms. And these mega disasters get a lot of press, but many of us on small farms feel those disasters in smaller crises on our land. That's a picture of my blueberry crop, poorly pollinated over the last couple of years. And it was really through my interest in pollination that I came to seed. Understanding, when I met a fellow named John Campanelli at University of Connecticut, and he came to my farm. He was talking about pollinators and butterflies and bees. And I said, I don't really have a problem because I get a crop every year. It's not like I'm facing crop loss. And he took me to my tomato greenhouse. He took me to the cucumbers, and he cut the plants open, opened them up, and counted the seeds. And he said, pollination, of course, is not just a light switch. It goes on and off. You have a blueberry, therefore you have a pollinator. He said it's about the seeds. The number of visits, the number of bees, the abundance of insects is demonstrated by how many seeds are formed in that blueberry. So it's all about the seeds. And the pollinators are showing us what has happened to our seed industry and what has happened to the natural habitat on which they depend. And so my interest in trying to get a better tomato crop, a juicier, more seedy tomato crop, drove me to understand the crisis in pollinators, which of course drove me to their habitat and the plants on which they depend. Sefra is going to talk about this now on let's see if I can advance this slide, on a national scale. And then we will bring it back down to the Northeast and talk a little bit about how this work is influencing our very small community in New England.
Thanks, Dina. Thank you to the Organic Seed Alliance for putting this conference together. It's so nice to see so many friends and colleagues. Rich, you better be paying attention in the back. And thank you to the translator on Zoom. I will speak as slowly as possible. And what we're going to look at now is, it almost feels like, when you have like the permaculture school and the primitive skills school in the same town and they don't know each other. Okay, what I kind of want to do is help be a bridge from the National Native Seed Conference that Dina and I just flew here from in Tucson, Arizona. And with the National Native Seed Conference, which is largely run by the Institute of Applied Ecology, which is based right here in Corvallis, Oregon, is they're organizing all the seed networks in our country that have formed from the National Seed Strategy. So in 2015, the Bureau of Land Management, they and all the different governmental and federal organizations,
they all came together and they said, hey, we have a problem, right? All of these natural disasters and fires and anthropogenically, sorry to the translators, like human-influenced areas that have been destroyed, we don't have the local seed from the areas that have been destroyed to reseed or to ecologically restore those areas with the right plants from the right place, right? Does that make sense? Like, we don't have countrywide, we don't have a backup of the truly local native seeds of our wilderness areas, so that when something happens to them, we have no capacity to be able to reseed them with those genetic plant materials. So what happened was the National Seed Strategy was formed again in 2015, and since then, all of these amazing seed networks across the country, the Nevada Seed Strategy, the Great Basin, California Seed Network, everywhere they started to form these networks going off of the template, which I'll show you that the seed strategy laid out. And we all said, okay, but what, oh, this is this, but, clicker, click here. So what geographic, there you go. Who's seen this eco-regional map from the Environmental Protection Agency? Okay, and I can't see on Zoom, but hopefully some people are raising hands here. So what happened is they said, we need to be working off of a shared framework, right? When we put our bug eyes on, like the pollinators Dina's talking about, we don't see where California begins or Nevada ends, right? We see the riparian areas, the coastal zones. We see it from an ecological lens. So what James Omernick at the Environmental Protection Agency did is he said, if we want to do true restoration and conservation, we need to be working off of a shared framework. And so he took the data sets from climate and geology and hydrology and soils and vegetation and wildlife and land use and human influence, and he overlaid them on top of each other. And what we get, this is level 3. There's also levels that zoom in and zoom out, are these beautiful eco-regional maps. The first time I saw it, I cried and I called the author and I said, this is brilliant. We're saved. Okay, this all makes sense now. So largely, the seed networks from the National Seed Strategy have been working off of an eco-regional framework. What we'll get into now is, 99% of the governmental funding goes out west because that's where all the governmental lands are. So in the Northeast, it's kind of like, don't forget about us over here. So we had to come up with a different strategy. But first, let's talk about what an ecotype is. How many people here have kind of heard that term be thrown around? Bill Braun, Freed Seed Federation. Go team. Okay, so basically, what an ecotype is, they're the heirlooms of the pollinators, right? When we're walking in our favorite wilderness areas and we see the plants and the trees and the flowers that are growing there, and without human influence have been growing there since time immemorial, however long that is, right? Obviously, we can have a whole symposium on that, but an ecotype is the plants that have been in that place that have been co-evolving with the soils and the insects and the amount of sunlight, and they're the seeds that are best adapted to place. Okay, so ecotype is just a fancy word for these local heirlooms, nature's heirlooms, I would say. Dina, you say that? Good. That's okay. My fearless mentor here. Okay, so that's what an ecotype is. So we're saying, okay, great. We have the National Seed Strategy. We have an eco-regional framework. And now what we're trying to do is figure out how we can increase the amount of ecotypic seed material for the Northeast. Does that all make sense? Have we covered our definitions? Yeah? Great. Okay. So, cool. How do we do that? Well, like this beautiful state, that's one of the best seed-growing states in the country with huge amounts of arable land and great big machines that can help do your seed harvest. in the fragmented landscapes of the Northeast, right? And, you know, we have New York and Massachusetts, and it's all residential. We had to figure out a different strategy. So Dina was executive director then of the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Connecticut, right? So we may not have a lot of open land, but we have a lot of smallhold farmers. So what we did was we created this template of saying we are going to build seed literacy amongst smallhold farmers to understand how to produce the specialty crop of ecotypic seed, okay? So, and we did this work largely under 2 specialty crop block grants of the USDA. So, what you can see here is I had a designer make it look like Alphonse Mucha, you know, that we make it pretty. But what we'll go through in a little more detail is first we're wild collecting the seed, then we're training farmers how to grow the seed, then we have to collect that seed. Perhaps you all recognize that beautiful seed cleaning machine that may be in the foyer. And then we have to make it available to do this restoration. And our entire impetus was to make this a replicable template for all of the Northeast. So, all right, we zoom in, okay? This is Dina's favorite picture, the Mona Lisa taking a selfie, right? Kind of makes sense, kind of just funny. But, so just like with art, we always ask the question of provenance. Where did it come from? Who painted it? What's going on? Now it's really time that we start asking that about seed, right? When we're putting pollinator plants into our gardens in the Northeast and you're buying it from a big box store, perhaps those plants are grown out in the middle of the country and they're nativars, right? Grown from cuttings. They're not seed grown. And so what we wanted to do is promote locally seed-grown native plants because that's going to best persist, and that is what your pollinators are looking for because that's what they recognize and know how to taste. So the Seeds of Success program, which is from the Bureau of Land Management, I got to be on their seed hunting crew where I was going into like the largest rattlesnake wilderness territories with cardboard taped to my leg, and my dad sent me snake gators. He was not impressed. But you're going and searching for these wild populations. But again, these are a vital natural resource that need to be safeguarded. And like we've seen with, how am I doing, translators? Sorry. Okay. Now, like we've seen with the foraging movement, if we don't know what we're doing and we have people who are just going out into the wilderness, then we can destroy wild populations, right? So what we're making sure that we do is that we're working with trained seed collectors and botanists who have permission to collect from the land that they're collecting on and know how to fill out this passport data. They know how to be marking down provenance and what else goes there and what type of soils we have. And so it's a great responsibility to help safeguard these vital natural resources, especially when there's only a few wild areas left in the Northeast to get this seed from. So now we have our seed and we've documented its provenance. Dina will cover this a little bit, but seeds in the Northeast, right, like this time of year, anemocori, seed dispersal by wind. The seeds are blowing off the plants, they land in the soil, and then they have to go through that freeze, thaw, snow, rain, freeze, thaw, snow, rain, right? That's how these seeds are cold stratified. I know I'm talking to an audience that knows all this, so we move on. So, but basically, you winter sow the seeds of the species that we've collected. We up-pot them, right? So that we have, let's say we collected a mountain mint. So we're going to winter sow the mountain mint, make sure we have at least 200 plugs of the mountain mint, and then we bring it to the farmers. So what we do with these farmers, they say, yeah, we know how to grow crops, but perhaps they've never grown perennials, and perhaps most of them had never been seed farmers. So we created, some things worked, some things didn't. We kind of learn as we walk the road here. But we had created a getting started toolkit of things to consider when you're planting these seed crops. What does it look like to have a multi-year planting? what the heck do the seeds even look like of these crops, right? And you're like, is that it? No, is that it? And so there's so much seed literacy that had to be taught through workshops and roundtables and in-person trainings to build this new cohort of seed farmers. And so through all this work, we have a whole bunch of farmers now growing these seed increase plots, right? So you can see, again, if it was a mountain mint, you have 200 species in a seed increase plot, and then you would farm it just like we farm anything else. How many of you in the audience do any seed increases that look like this just for other crops? Okay, few, yeah? Even Michael in the back, awesome. Okay, so then what happens? Well, then we see this beautiful symphony of ecology, right? The more diversity you're bringing back onto your farm with these native plants, all of these pollinators are like, we've been looking for this forever. We're in this wasteland of lawns and residential fragmented areas, and you're like, there are these cool caterpillars, right? Do you know what are they called that like put the petals on their back? And yeah, there's all these insects that you never even knew existed. And for organic farmers and for productivity, the more that those beneficial insects are back, then the less of the predatory ones you have. So this beautiful homeostasis returns. And the species that we chose, we wanted to make sure we were picking species that would bloom all throughout the seasons, right? So that we could feed these pollinators whenever they were hungry. I always say that joke of like, don't invite house guests over and just feed them on Monday, y'all. Got to feed them the whole week that they're there. Okay, we got a few left. Okay. All right, so, and you know, we also think about our night pollinators, right? Like you look at the Rebecca, you look at the Black-eyed Susan, you're like, where are the pollinators? And the volunteers on Dina's farm put on red headlamps and they were like, night pollinators. It's not just throughout the season, it's throughout the day. So, here we have like the New York ironweed. Then it goes to seed. And as we all know, all of the seeds aren't going to go to seed at the same time. And unlike, you know, with more of our cultivated field crops that we need to have uniformity, that in 60 days and 90 days we know that it blooms and we harvest it, right, Rich? You know, it's like, no. For the wild seeds, we want to be safeguarding as much of those brilliant arcs of genetic diversity as possible. Because, as we've seen, some seasons are hotter and wetter or drier, and only a few plants make seed, right? And you're like, oh, it's a failed crop. But as Dina's remarked, right, actually, those plants are the best plants that know how to survive in a drought. Or those plants, those genetics are the best plants that know how to survive in a really wet year. So we want to make sure that we're not using our own human influence to make any selections, because we don't know where these seeds are going to go, to what restoration project they'll go to, and we want to make sure that, like, nature's smarter than us, you know. I can all see that. So, yeah, again, when we do seed collection, we make sure we're collecting the seeds that go to seed from the first of the season to that bulk in the middle, all the way to the stragglers at the end. And so from this work, this model template that Dina and I had created for the Ecotype project has now been replicated across many states of the Northeast. And now in the state of Rhode Island, now all these farmers are doing this work, right? And so the system's working. We're able to collectively address this national seed strategy by amplifying and increasing the amount of local seed that we have. So from that as well, now all these sub-regional hubs are forming. So all throughout the Northeast, there's now these hubs that are saying, who are our seed collectors? Who are our seed farmers? Where are we cleaning our seed? And how the heck are we commercially distributing the seed? So the last slide that I'll show you is, you know, as this grassroots upward pressure is starting to come from people who want to buy the seed, right? Dina and I have talked to so many people about this. And for the first few years, everyone would say, we want ecotypic seed. Where can we buy it? And we said, you can't, but we're working on that, right? So this was about the time that the Northeast Seed Network was forming. And with that, you know, again, with all of those sub-regional hubs that are forming, with all of these people that are emerging, say, hey, we do that work. We want to be a part of this network. We start to understand where the botanists are and where the seed growers are and where the seed processing facilities are. And Dina, again, who I'm going to pass the mic back over to with her brilliant brain, created this map so that we could find, you can search by species or by who you're looking for, and you can even overlay the beautiful ecoregions. So with that, I pass it back over, and thank you all so much.
Thank you. She'll be back. She'll be back. Don't worry. She'll come back. The story of the Ecotype project, the rise of the Northeast Seed Network, the creation of this small seed company out of the shed behind my house, has really felt like, in many ways, we sort of caught a tiger by the tail. That we sort of posited this idea that farmers might like to have a couple of pollination crops on their farm, that might like to start getting involved in ecotypic seed production. And in my mind, it was a very tiny little thing. And I was absolutely green and new, as folks here know. I was so new to the seed world. And it grew so quickly. Sefra became a sort of human switchboard operator, connecting and plugging in people who were calling from Nevada, from Block Island, from everywhere to say, we have restoration projects, we have a dam removal, we have a storm surge that wiped out a part of our riparian corridor, we have a wildfire, and we need ecotypic seed because it will persist in the landscape. After Sandy in the Northeast, dunes were wiped out, National Fish and Wildlife came in, spent thousands and thousands and thousands of taxpayer dollars to put the plants back on those dunes. They made it about 3 years, and then they collapsed. And they said, darn it, it wasn't our seed, it wasn't our shad, it wasn't our milkweed. When you think of that ecotypic map that Sefra showed you, and then our nursery industry, much like our food industry, has taken this immersion blender to the genetics of wild things in this nation. So if you, as Sefra says, want to buy milkweed, chances are the genetics are from Tennessee, whether you're buying it in Maine or Nevada. So this tiger that we had by the tail became dizzying for me. And one of the wonderful moments was when I realized that this little seed company run out of a shed in the back of my house was starting to make some real cash. And I could put that cash to work in ways, because this is a private enterprise, I could put it into projects that I believed in. And I was frustrated with the ability or the inability for all of these seed folks to find each other. And so I'm going to bring this tool and highlight it for a minute as it illustrates some of those questions I talked about at the beginning. This map was initially created because I wanted all of these folks in the restoration world and the seed production world on the eco-regional side, on the ecotypic side, to find each other. You can look at the top, that key, and you can sort those little bubbles by whether or not the member of the Northeast Seed Network is a wild collector. If that's what you can do and you want to be listed on this map, you just fill out the form and we put you in. Do you have a seed bank? Do you have seed cleaning equipment? Are you a nursery grower? Are you a researcher? Some of them you'll see the bubbles are all colors because places like the Native Plant Fest might be doing a little bit of everything up in Massachusetts. But what I loved about this map is that it, and I literally just spent a little money, hired some coder in his pajamas to create this thing that I visioned in the night. And you can sort it, as you say, by species that you're looking for. But the real impetus behind it expresses what I think is the values of this network, which is, first of all, transparency. That it is amazing how many people have their hearts in the right place but do it alone. Second, I think we have committed ourselves to sharing openly, sharing our seed, sharing our equipment, sharing our knowledge, to have someone, in this ecotypic seed world like me, who has never grown these crops, and you can't just turn the packet over and do what it says on the back, because there isn't a packet when it's coming from the land trust down the road. To have someone from a botanic garden show up and teach you is incredibly valuable, and I just didn't know that they were 20 minutes away. Because you can't call Yukon Extension to do this kind of work yet. And lastly, I will point out that for someone like me, as a very small family farmer, you get into this restoration world. There's some very big players, and it feels like they get all the money and all the grants, and they just run out of the room. And then there's some very small players who feel like their work isn't significant enough. And so the last thing that I would say about this map is that nobody's circle is any bigger than anybody else's circle on this map. If you have something to contribute, we want to see you, and we want to know what you can do. And so this leads me to my question, which is, as a novice in my first time ever coming to the Organic Seed Alliance gathering, is there a way that this could be useful to you? The tool exists. It's just as easy as sending me a spreadsheet, and I can put your region on this. And does the Botanic Garden down the road have a seed bank that is climate controlled, and they got some grant for $2 million to build it, and they might be willing to share it? Or does it matter to you that the Native Plant Trust just built a multiple hundreds of thousands of a restoration accelerator? I don't know what it is yet, but it's going to be amazing. And they have tons of seed cleaning equipment, and they're part of this network, and they want to be listed because they're willing to share. And does that somehow lift all of us up together? I'm going to, does this work? What works? Yes, this works. That was a lot of Google, so I'm going to take you for a moment to take a breath and just look at my farm and look at the seed crop. And I'm lucky in that I was not a seed breeder. I was not a seed grower before I did this. But so the dismantling of my seed farmer brain didn't necessarily have to happen. But I noticed in talking to other seed growers that so much of what you say, every fifth word here is about selection. And of course, selection happens in nature, but to a completely different to a completely different tune. In the agricultural seed world, for 10,000 years, we have asked plants to be predictable. And if they are not predictable, they are not chosen. They're so predictable that you can turn your tomato packet over and it does exactly what it says. It germinates in 50 days, you harvest it 15 days, you harvest it in 65 days. Tomatoes in that variety that don't do that don't get saved. But nature, wild places, survive because they are unpredictable. And that's the only way they make it. If that's Joe Pieweed threw all of her seed and it all germinated on the same day, you'd be in real trouble if that day happened to be a rainstorm or a flood or a drought. And so she throws that seed, and some of it germinates when you expect it. I learned this the hard way. You throw this tray aside, come back to it 6 months later, and there is another flush of seed that is germinated. You get curious, you throw it aside, you come back to it a year later, and there will be another flush of seed that is germinated. And what we are asking our ecotypic farmers to do is not make a selection. Know that nature may in fact be doing it the right way, that unpredictability is a survival mechanism. And so it's a completely different way of understanding our relationship and our responsibility to place. Part of the responsibility, of course, is to get out of the way. And so that winnow wizard is another great example of something that I thought, this makes my life so much easier. We have these incredible farmers who are doing all this great work. The winnow wizard came along, and suddenly I thought, there goes that endless screaming and sieving and trying to figure out how to get the wings off the little, I don't know what they call them, but anyway. And the botanist showed up and said, you have made that piece of technology, as wonderful as it is, has made a selection. And you don't know if that light seed in the trash bin might have learned something about how to survive, might exhibit one of those micro adaptations. So don't throw it away. Don't select for the heavy seed or select for the good looking stuff. Your germination rates on ecotypic seed, therefore, are going to be extremely low, and it completely embarrassing for anybody who is trying to sell seed that you're selling seed that may have a 20% germination rate, but you hope that that 20% carries some of that intelligence, that nature is working as hard as she can to keep up with this changing climate by teaching those little offspring how to do it. So now to the practical. I'm going to just walk you through, Sefra sort of walked you through the model, but I'll talk a little bit about who we are and what we're doing. A tiger by the tail is perhaps overstating what has happened. There are 15 farmers, which is wonderful. Over the last couple of years, I've put our champion Bill and Dee in the center because we're here at OSA, have agreed to join in, which is wonderful. There, of course, is me in my respirator breathing helmet. I'll talk about cleaning native seed in a minute. And of course, partners throughout the region who have said, come to our talks, heard Sefra speak, and say, I get it that I need the pollination services. This seed may go into a restoration project and hold a riverbank, and this feels like a legacy move for me. I like where this crop is going. And because we have so far cleared the field by being little and regional, it's worth something. And so, not knowing any better, I priced the seed by the costs of production of the farmers. And I didn't realize that that wasn't what you were supposed to do, because I got to make a living growing the seed and selling the seed. And so we've made a very valuable product. And it's super expensive, for good reason. And it is increasingly coming to light that eco-regional math that Sefra showed you may in fact mean we need lots of little operations like this, lots of small regional seed companies safeguarding their own land trusts, safeguarding their own wild places. And so the very big seed companies are going to have to either figure out how to get little, or the little seed companies are going to have to figure out how to move into this space in order for the goals of that national seed strategy to be met. The seed right now is sold through the Northeast Seed Collective. Sefra brought all these plants out to all of the farmers. Everyone was so excited about the pollinators showing up and the soldier bugs and the lacewing. And we thought we got years before there's a seed crop because these things are perennial. But wouldn't you know, farmers figured it out, and within 3 or 4 months, I had cargo vans of seed showing up in leaf bags, uncleaned, at my farm. And they said, you got us into this, you better figure out how to get it. So I started the Northeast Seed Collective, a company that takes seed from these farmers, and in that same little garage, set up my winnow wizard and a bunch of screens, some of which I built, some of which I think our notes from the first year were like, for this penstemon, you use Dina's coffee sieve, and for this one, you use the pasta strainer, and for this one. But we've since grown up a little bit, and there is more sophisticated seed cleaning equipment, including relying on some of the folks in that network map. I didn't realize there was a $20,000 Westrop drum thresher half an hour from my farm. So that changed my life when I built the map and found them. And so that seed is largely sold online. As I said, we also have just starting now wholesale seed racks. And more restoration folks and nurseries are coming and saying, we would like an ounce because we're going to start putting plugs in production, not just for Mrs. O'Leary's pollinator pathway mailbox garden, but for some larger restoration bids. And so if you go onto the website, it's kind of a strange way of doing business, but the blue vervain, for example, Verbena histata, is grown by 3 different farmers in 3 ecoregions, and therefore it is cleaned and sold as separate lots. When you go to buy the seed, you choose if you want to buy Ecoregion 59, Ecoregion 58, or Ecoregion 84. Thanks. And it is all just packed. It's all mostly mail order still. And increasingly, we are getting interest from, as I say, National Fish and Wildlife and saying, could you get to larger scale? And that's where I sort of return to you guys as an emerging industry. I am not asking anybody to go, so far out on a limb and then have the National Fish and Wildlife or the Forest Service saw it off behind you. Don't create, I'm not suggesting that we ramp this up to massive scale, but Peggy Allwell says we need 500 million tons of seed to deal with the wildfires in the last year.
She runs all that.
She runs the Bureau of Land Management Seed Strategy. Thank you. That's a lot of seed, and someone's going to have to pay for it. But I wonder, for those of you who are thinking about this work, where am I going to go with this? The extent to which those folks who are currently growing grains and grasses and wheat would possibly be willing at some point to shapeshift for a contract that says we need warm season grasses in the Northeast. And the brilliance of the people at this conference would accelerate the brilliance of the people at the National Native Seed Conference where we were last week, and vice versa. And so the Ecotype project has really managed to sort of set an open table with the hopes that these conversations will allow us all to sort of get in the same ship and start rowing in the same direction. We also had created these guilds, and I'll talk a little bit more before we take a few questions about the ways in which we market the seed. So often the crops are still somewhat unpredictable, and therefore the consumer education side of this has been really, I think, where Sefra's work has come in to be extremely valuable, in that we are asking people not to choose plants anymore by just whether or not their garden needs blue or whether their garden needs red, but whether their garden needs moss or whether their garden has enough places for the butterflies to nest and overwinter bumblebees and things like that. And so we're really asking people to think about their landscape as a habitat and not necessarily drill down to, I want this or that or whatever, but we have these sort of habitats that you can fill. And so these guilds have been helpful in that regard. Sefra also, I think she said she was going to make like a concert t-shirt. I think she's, you're up to like 87 garden club talks in the last year. Because ecotypic seed is not like your spring annuals. You don't necessarily plant it in the spring, you plant it in the fall. And that both for farmer education and consumer education has been a huge hurdle. The seed company went into the black its first year because of these silly boxes, which I screwed together in that same garage when I pushed the window lizard aside. It's a screened box that is an all-in-one kit. It is a tray, some soil, some worm casting, 3 packets of seed. You set it all out in December, January, February, and you leave it outside, locked, so the mice and birds can't get into it, and the seed will stratigraphy over the course of the winter.
Also, one of the people at the garden club actually will be able to make the seed pack.
Yep.
Instead of distributing, as they say, it's really expensive bird.
I've definitely sold a lot of very expensive bird food. So the last thing I can say is in this sort of emerging and inchoate network, I just wanted to leave by saying join us, follow us, come to these events. If you are interested in trying to build a regional hub of ecotypic seed farmers or enhance your seed farming community by including some of these ecotypic species, just call us. And as much as I can share at least that map platform for free and talk to you in more specifics about some of our experiences. If you have any questions, I believe we have a few minutes. Is that right, person? 3 minutes. If you have questions about the seed company or anything else, I can take them now. Sefra, thank you so much. For all of you who are here, thank you so much.
Thanks to everybody on Zoom.
And thanks to everyone on Zoom, of course. Any quick questions?
Yeah. Oh, that's what it was.
Any questions have to use the mic down here.
Oh, I think.
Have anyone heard of the latest
Like,
I'm just curious how many of you have actually heard about the National Seed Strategy and other. Okay, and you seem familiar with the Institute of Applied Ecology as well. Right. Yeah, and their seed increase farm is right here in Corvallis. If anyone on Zoom couldn't hear, they were at her farm, and she was the previous presenter who was talking all about the amazing, well, Southwest grains that you're growing. But anyways, if anything else can be taken from this talk, it's like, check out the National Seed Strategy. Look up all of these amazing seed networks that exist. They may or may not have all just lost our funding. So anyway, so let's just keep on trucking and mucking or whatever it is. But anyway, yeah, it was kind of a sobering conference, but climate change has been canceled. Yeah, if we can't laugh about it, then we're not going to, collectively get over it. I'm glad this is going to be on Zoom and on public record for everyone. I think I just messed up there. Anyway.
There are no questions. We're around, obviously, for the rest of the day, so you can catch us at any point. Thank you so much.
And if you're ever out in the Northeast, let us know. Okay.
Thank you.
Save seeds, seeds save.